So, today we are celebrating Ganesha. In the Hindu lexicon of gods, there's all of these different deities, often made up of male and female counterparts. This is the one case that I know of that Ganesha is the child of Shiva and Shakti, also known as Parvati. Hinduism is really a monotheistic religion. They really believe that there's one God. But they have all of these incredible manifestations of that one God that are available to us to kind of gain these deeper understandings and relationships with the divine. My experience of Hinduism has always been that I'm sure that there are many aspects of Hinduism that are very intellectual, but the part of Hinduism that has always spoken to me is that there's all of these stories that exist about all of these different deities. And a way that it's often taught, to adults as well as to children, is in comic book form. They have all of these comic books depicting the stories of these deities. And another way that Hinduism deals with these deities is that they do puja to them. It's this way of celebration. So for me, I enjoy it because it gets me out of my right brain, that intellectual brain, and it really allows me to enter into relationships with these forces, with these resources in a little different way for me, which works for me and is refreshing for me. So as a result of that, I always kind of like to share these with you. And so today I'm going to be telling you the story of Ganesha. And this is in your program, but I put it on your song sheets because it's a little bit longer than the regular words of wisdom. So you can follow along if you want to get that out. You can look at that. You don't have to because I'm going to be reading it, but it is there. And this is taken from the Shiva Purana. Excuse me. So one day, the goddess Parvati was at home on Mount Kailash preparing for a bath. As she didn't want to be disturbed, she told Nandi, her husband Shiva's bull, to guard the door and let no one pass. Nandi faithfully took his post, intending to carry out Parvati's wishes. But when Shiva came home and naturally wanted to go inside, Nandi had to let him pass, being loyal first to Shiva, of course. Parvati was angry at this slight, but even more than this, at the fact that she had no one loyal to herself as Nandi was to Shiva. So taking the turmeric paste for bathing from her body and breathing life into it, she created Ganesha, declaring him to be her own loyal son. The next time Parvati wished to bathe, she posted Ganesha on guard duty at the door. And in due course, Shiva came home, only to find this strange boy telling him that he couldn't enter his own house. Shiva was furious, so he ordered his army to destroy the boy. But they all failed. All of the soldiers failed to be able to destroy him. This surprised Shiva and aggravated him even more. Seeing that this was no ordinary boy, this usually peaceful Shiva decided he would have to fight him, and in his divine fury severed Ganesha's head, killing him instantly. When Parvati learned of this, she was so enraged and insulted that she decided to destroy the entire of creation. Lord Brahma, being the creator, naturally had issues with this and pleaded with her to reconsider her drastic plan. She said she would, but only if two conditions were met. One, that Ganesha be brought back to life, and two, that he be forever worshipped above all other gods. Now, Shiva, having calmed down a little bit by this time, agreed to Parvati's conditions. He sent Brahma out with orders to bring back the head of the first creature he crossed that was lying with its head facing north. Brahma soon returned with the head of a strong and powerful elephant, which Shiva placed onto Ganesha's body. Breathing new life into him, he declared Ganesha to be his own son as well, and gave him the status of being foremost among gods and the leader of all ganas, which is the classes of being. Ganapate. Commercial break. All right. How'd you like that story? All right. So let's take a look at that story, because it teaches us a bunch of stuff that I think is very important. First of all, my biggest reaction when I first heard that story is I could not believe how Shiva and Parvati both could be so filled with ego. It's like, but that's what's nice about these stories, because it's like they anthropomorphize and give to the gods these human characteristics which make them a little bit easier for us to relate to. So we first meet Parvati, who's angry, and she feels so not good enough when Shiva and Nandi being too loyal to him. She feels like Shiva's got this, I don't have this, I must not be good enough, and man, I got to do something about that. I got to be in control. I have to fix this for myself. Now, how many of you can relate to that sentiment? Yeah, absolutely.
Could you clarify one thing? Was Shiva and Parvati, were they married?
They are. They're consorts.
They're consorts.
Uh-huh.
Oh, so it's a husband and wife dispute.
Right. Now you're understanding it a little bit more.
Thank you. I do know.
Right. Now you're understanding it. I heard you telling that story before we started the service today. I knew you would get that part. Right. Then we look at Shiva. And Shiva is just outraged that somebody dare stand in his way. And he's willing to have his armies destroy this little boy. And then when he can't, when his own armies can't do it, he's willing to do it himself. He is not going to have his way. How many of you can relate to that in your own lives? Right. Yeah, we have these ego parts of us that always think that they know best. They want to drive the bus. They know what's best. We know best how to take care of ourselves, and we're going to do it. And all too often, we don't care who that's going to affect or how it's going to affect them. Ring a bell? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Certainly rings it for me. Then, Parvati feels so dissed that she's willing, she's so angry now. She's getting ready to have such a temper tantrum that she's going to be willing to destroy all of creation. Now that certainly brings making our lives unmanageable to a whole other level. Now doesn't it? But symbolically, isn't that what we do so often? We don't care whether our whole lives are going to become unmanageable. Not only ours personally, but everybody that it affects. We're just going to do what we want to do. Right?
Right.
All too often. All too often. All right. So, what do I take the meaning of this part of the story to mean? Here's the bottom line. We are so often our worst enemies. We are often the biggest obstacles that we have in our lives. It's usually us that it is that we have to deal with. That's why when we were singing the other side, it says it's often just in our mind. But not just in our mind. Unfortunately, it's often in our actions. Often those parts of us are driving the bus and they just want to have what they want. It's our will that's going to be done, not necessarily God's will. So it teaches us about how important it is to be in relationship with these parts of us. These parts of me are always there. They're always being triggered. You know? The best that I can do is try to recognize them when they're coming up in my life. And as I'm recognizing them, then I can try to enter into relationship with those parts of me so that they don't necessarily drive the bus. So that I can acknowledge that they're there. I can acknowledge why they feel that way, but they don't have to be driving my bus. And in this way, I can try to allow my higher power to be the one that's driving the bus. In this way, it's God's will being done, not my way being done. And that's always the litmus test that I'm looking for. I'm always kind of walking that tightrope, seeing if that's in fact the case, or if my ego's in charge. So, now let's turn our attention to Ganesha. So, can you relate to this little boy whose mother wants to basically use him to serve her? You know? She's not really cared about taking care of him. You know, she's kind of like, here she's depicting the mother of codependency. You know, and that it's all about, you know, you be my rescuer, you take care of me, you're here to serve me and do what I want to do. How many of you can kind of relate to that? Yeah. Then, of course, we have this father, you know, who's out running around so much that, like, he doesn't even know that he has a son. Right? Sound familiar at all? And then, when he doesn't get his way, he's going to flip his top, lose his temper, and basically do whatever he wants to do. might also be a little bit familiar, or all too familiar to some of us. Then Ganesha has this elephant's head on top of his shoulders. Now just think for a minute how he must have felt when he went to kindergarten. Just imagine how different he would have felt from all the other boys and little girls. Just think for a moment about how not good enough he would have felt. And what we see is that as traumatic as all of that would have been for Ganesha, what we also see is that that was his spiritual path. It was like that's the way that it was supposed to happen for Ganesha. Of course, I can't imagine that while it was all going on, he was coming from that centered, serene place of saying, oh yeah, oh, I know that this is exactly the way things are supposed to be right now. No, man, he's probably out there battling those guys, trying to beat the hell out of his father, doing everything that he could, trying to battle those obstacles. But what we can see and appreciate from the story is that that was, in fact, his path, his spiritual path. It's like, in many ways, that's how he becomes the deity who can channel the energy of the remover of obstacles. Because he had so many obstacles that he had to get into a better relationship with, that's how he learned to do it, by doing it. And that is the message for all of us here today. It's all about us being able to be in relationship with those obstacles in healthier ways. It's about us being willing to see that often we seek problems because we need their gifts. Those obstacles, those problems often transform us into the unique people and individuals that we are. They serve a huge purpose for us. And although I have been aware of this at previous times and have shared this with you, this week in particular, that was so clear to me. I think I had mentioned to many of you that this past Wednesday, my son, Jonathan, who was seriously wounded in Iraq in 2005, and amongst many other injuries he sustained, he had lost his leg, left leg below the knee. The whole reason that he went into the army was because he wanted to become a police officer. And when he was traumatized in that way, he thought that he had to give up his dreams. As it all turned out, he is a perfect example of what it is that I'm talking about. Because as a result of all of those problems, all of those hardships, all of those obstacles, quote, obstacles that he had to face, he has grown into the man that he is today. He went to Walter Reed. He ended up working with a physical therapist who he ended up marrying. You know, he ended up going to school down in Maryland, meeting a police officer who became like a mentor to him and said, hey, Jonathan, if you want to still become a police officer, you know, I'll show you how. And he did that. And 3 years ago now, he went into the academy, graduated 2 years ago, and now for 2 years has been a police officer. And on Wednesday, the Theodore Roosevelt Association, which is this organization that works closely with police departments, recognized and honored him as nationally the police officer for this year, who they wanted to recognize that despite all of the obstacles and hardships and difficulties that he had to go through, he has lived his dream. I saw him up there speaking in front of this auditorium of people. Like, I could not believe that this was my son. I was so proud of him, how much he's grown, how much he's evolved. And you can already see the signs of like where else this is taking him. I hear all of his superior officers telling him about, like, you know, how they want to be sure that he moves up in ranks in the police department. I heard some of them talking to him about how, you know, he should run for mayor of their small little town, you know? And he could do it. He could do it. He'd do it well. So I apologize for my stint here as the proud father, but it makes my point very, very well. I didn't even know this at the time that I picked it, but it makes my point. All of his obstacles and hardships were really part of his path, as they are for each and every one of us. And it's only that ego part of us that's always saying when we meet these obstacles, no, this shouldn't be here. No, get rid of this. No, I'm going to do this in my way. So, I want you to just pause for a moment. And I want you to just think about and appreciate how many of the obstacles, hardships, difficulties that you have experienced in your own life have led you and are leading you to be the person that you truly are. Take a minute to think about the obstacles, difficulties, and hardships that are in your life today. Think about how you want to be in relationship with them so that they can be transformed, so that they can simply become a part of your own spiritual path. What are the gifts, the lessons that they have to offer you? So, Jai Ganesha.
Jai Ganesha.